Hi, it's Pavel with a C# exercise from the Daily Programmer on Reddit. Here's the link. I will also post it in the description. And this is an exercise 180 or challenge 180, and the description is: the look and say sequence is an interesting sequence of numbers where each term is given by describing the makeup of the previous term. The first term is given as 1. The second term is 1, 1, because the first term 1 consists of single 1. Alright, let's look at the input and outputs. So I enter 1, so there is, how many 1s there are? 1. So the first one is like the counter. There is 1 of 1, or there is 1 of number 1. Now in this line, I'm looking at it, or the program will look at it, and it will count. It will go and say, okay, there are 2 of number 1s. Then it comes over here and it says, okay, there is 1 of number 2. So it will write 2, 1 of number 2, and 1 of number 1. So this one is this one, and this number 2 is this number 2, and this one and this one are the counters. It basically counts how many occurrences of that number are in that string. So, and over here we have 1 occurrence of number 1, which is this one. We have 1 occurrence of number 2, which is number 2, and we have 2 occurrences of number 1s, which is these 2. So here's the 1. 2 occurrences of number 1. Okay, so that's basically what we are supposed to do. We are supposed to take each line, find out how many times each of the numbers is being repeated, then write down the counter for that number or for that count, and followed by the actual number that we were counting. So 1 count of 1. 2 counts of 1, 1 count of 2, 1 count of 1, 1 count of 1, 1 count of 2, 2 counts of 1, and so forth. Okay, so let me start working on that, I guess. So I will do a method. We'll have the main method, of course, but I will also have a method that I will simply call to do the looping. It won't return anything. It will simply loop, and it will loop through a list. I will use a list of integers, and I'll call it numbers. This will be basically my input. This will be the actual, or I mean output for the strings, but it will be converted to integer. So I will have one function that will pretty much take care of that, and over here in the main, well, over here I will need a static variable of integer, and I will call it loop control, which will, as the name implies, control how many times we are going to be looping. Alright, so let's declare the list. I will do so I'll call it numbers, and it equals new list of integers. Okay, it's gonna be numbers, so it matches this one. It will be passed into that function, and the initial value will be the I will do it as a constant. It will be the 1, which is basically the first number that we enter. In this case it's 1, but I mean we could enter 2 or 3 and then do that kind of counting. So but I'll just call it initial value, and then we can change this, and actually let me make it capitalized. Initial value. I'll change that. Okay, so now I get the initial value from the user, so no, I mean not from the user, but I will output the initial value. There is no calculation or looping with this number. It will simply display it. So console.writeLine, and it's gonna be the initial value. It's gonna be the initial value. So it will simply output, in this case, 1. If I change this to 2, it will output 2, and so forth. So now I'm going to add that. That's gonna be my first element in my list. So I will do numbers.add the initial value. This is like a preparation for for the actual processing it. Now the way I decided to do it, that in order for me to determine, you see, I will have to compare two strings. Like when I go through the loop, I will compare this one, you know, and this one to make sure, to find out if they're equal, because if they are, then I will have 2 in a counter. In other words, I compare the 2 neighboring elements in the list to determine if they are the same. And in order for me to do that, if I come over here, there's no second element. There's nothing to compare. So this is my first element. I simply add it directly. But the way I decided to do it, that each string I will add like a flag, and it's going to be a -1. So each string that I will add will have the last element of -1, and that's because that will help me determine the end of the string, so I will not get out of bounds with the list and with the loop. So I added the initial value, and I will also add the -1. And I will simply add -1. So now our list contains 1 and -1. So our -1 indicates the last number in the list. It's like we have a list with sequence, you know, of strings or of numbers, and the last one is -1, because that, and when we hit that, we know that we hit the end of the list. So it is. I'll just comment it. It is used to detect the last valid number before being out of bounds. That's gonna be important in the loop. So now I have the initial value. I seeded the list with the initial value and the -1, and now I can simply call the loop. The loop function, and for some reason it won't let me. Oh, I was out of sorry, I was out of the class. I mean, out of the main function. So loop, and we will pass the list with the initial values in it. All right. So the initial values are 1 and 0, 1. So it comes over here. It receives the list as the argument, and now we can process it. So I will create another list. I'll call it temporary list, and it's going to be as integer. This is going to be used to swap the lists. Once this is processed, I will put the values in here, and I will be able to clear this list for the next value. So in other words, after I enter the initial values, I will be able to clear it and put these values in there. But while I'm doing that, I need to keep track of these values, so I will put those in the temporary list. So that's that. And we will need the counter, which is going to be basically the first number. This will count the occurrences of the characters or of the numbers. It will count 1 and 2, for example. In this case, the counter will return 2, so there will be 2 of 1s. Okay, now we have our first number, and our second number, oops, that's too far. And these I will use in the loop to get the within each iteration to kind of store the number one by one. So over here you'll see how it works in just a second. So I will start the loop. I'm going to loop as many times as there are numbers in our numbers list. So I will count and plus plus. In other words, this way I won't get out of the bounds of the list. Plus there's nothing else to count anyway, only as many numbers as there are. So here comes the first number and second number in play. I will go the first number. You know what, let me name them all both the same. I'll just name them number. So first number now equals the element I from the list. All right, that's the first number that we are capturing. So it's going to be the first number, and in our case it's going to be 1, because we go from the beginning, the initial value. Remember, the next value behind it is -1, so which is going to be the second number. But before we do the second number, we need to make sure that we are not at the end of the list. So if our first number equals -1, then we know, hey, this is the end of the list. End of the list. We can output, and we will also have to reset values. So if the element we are capturing is I, if our first number is -1, then this is the end of the list. There's nothing to compare anymore. So we hit the end of the line, so to speak, and now we have all the data that we can deal with and output. So what I will do, I will clear the list, clear, and let me quickly see. This is yeah, let's clear it, and over here we can output for each statement we can output whatever is in our temporary list. So in our variable element in temp list, because this one still holds the values that we were capturing. Now and we will simply output the console.WriteLine. Actually not right line, just right, because we are writing them one next to each other. Element. Okay, so if they are not equal, if first number is not equal to 1, if it's not the end of the line, then we can still do more looping. All right, so if that's the case, then we can go into the else, and if you are not at the end of the line, then we can assign the second number, which would be no, this would be our first and this would be our second. So if, for example, if we are in this line, this is our first number, this is our second, and then we go again to first and second. So our second number equals numbers, which is gonna be I, but it's gonna be the next one to it, so I plus 1. Okay, and now within this we have to see if they are the same. If first number that equals our second number, in other words, if our first number is the same as the second, basically over here, for example, our first is the same as second, then all we do is add 1 to the counter. The counter started as 1, so now we have 2. Now we know that there are 2 of the same numbers, so now the counter equals 2. Otherwise, we'll add to our temp list, not the regular list, but our temp list, we will add the counter. So if they are not the same, we will simply add 1. Counter will be 1. Alright, and then after that we will add the value. We will add the list to our temp list, and we will add the first number. So now, in other words, if they are not the same, the counter will be 1, so we will add 1 and followed by whatever the number is. So for example, in this case, if we are here, these are not the same, so the counter will be 1 because there's only 1 of 1s, and the first number is 1 as well, so we have 1 and 1. Okay, and then we go check another 2 characters. But before we check the characters, we need to reset the counter back to just 1. Otherwise, the counter would never decrease, it would just keep adding to it. So we have that, but okay, so if we are at the end of the line, we'll do this. Otherwise, if I are not at the end of the line, we'll see if the numbers, two neighboring numbers are the same. If they are, we'll add to the counter, go to next loop, and check it again. And if they're not the same anymore, then we can add the counter as the first element in the array, in the list, followed by the number that we were counting. And then we will reset the counter over here. But we have to do more over here in the when we are at the end of the line. And what we need to do, actually over here, I will do the brackets. After we write the number, we have to add it to our, remember, we cleared the list, the original numbers list. It's empty, but now we have to add to it the line before that. So let's say we output in this one. So we have to capture that, because that's what we are going to be comparing to, or counting in the next iteration. So we need the copy of that in our list. So our numbers dot add element. So after I output it on the console, I will add that value to our numbers, and it's gonna be our initial values for the next iteration of the loop. So that's our for each. Now, once I have the initial values, once again, I'm going to add the -1 to it. Just like I did at the beginning, just like I did over here. I'm adding, but this time the initial values will be whatever was already output. So again, we start with these are our very initial values that I manually enter. Then we count them, we do the counting. So now these two will be our initial value, and I'm adding -1 to it. And then I go and do counting of that. I output it, then this will be our initial value for this row, and so forth. So so now I have everything stored back to our numbers of list, or our numbers list. So now I need to clear my temp list. I need to clear it because I'm going to be using that again with the next iteration. We're starting basically from the scratch once again. With each iteration we have a different initial values. So I will do that. We will add 1 to the counter because we count. It was another loop. But we also do a loop control. Loop control will simply say how many values we want to, how many rows we want to actually output. So when it comes to that, I will simply say, for example, if loop control is less than 10. This is all arbitrary. You know, you can. This is basically me telling them I don't want more than 10 of these countings of these rows. I could have 15 or 20 or whatever, but but for now I'm just saying I don't want any more than 10. So if it is less than 10, then we can still loop. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to call the same function, the loop, and pass the new numbers to it, the new list with the new values. With over here, the first initial value was put in the list, and we called the loop a function from the main method. But now I'm calling the loop function from within the loop function. It's like a you know, calling itself. So an incursion. Because it's gonna loop, this is the sentinel value. That otherwise, if I didn't have this, it would call itself over and over and over again. But now it will simply call itself 10 times because we add 1 to the loop control with each iteration. Okay, so I think that might be even all. Let's see. So we start with 1 as the initial value, and we should have 10 rows. Whoa, that was too fast. First of all, I need over here I need console.readline to pause it, to pause my screen. I'll start again, but I didn't get it right. We got it all in one row. So over here, when we hit the end of the line, so to speak, we need to move to the next row. So all I have to do is somewhere in here, just write console.writeLine, because here I write the output and then I move to the next line for the next iteration. So now it should output it. All right, so we have, let me see the first. Okay, so you can see we start with 1. That's our, remember these negative ones are not there. So that's our initial input. 1 1 2 1 1 2 1 1 1 1 1 2 2 1 3 1 2 2 1 1 3 1 2 2 1 1. So it's working. Basically, it's calculating correct. Now I'm getting this 2 1 at the end for some reason. That's definitely wrong. All these, the bottom ones, and so something is happening here. When I go to clear this, okay, so here I can see we are looping number of numbers that count. In other words, how many elements are in the list. That's how many times we loop. But each of these have a different value. Okay, I'll just exit it. Basically what's happening is the focus, after, you know, we come over here and we call the loop, but when we're done with it, we come back over here at the end of the statement to over here, and it goes over back to the iteration again. It tries to do another loop. All I have to do is break it. Just once we are at the end of the line, break out of the loop. Don't do any more iterations and go for this particular rows. In other words, if you come over here and you encounter -1, don't try to do another loop. Just exit and go to the next row. I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but you'll see that it should probably work now. 1 and 1 1. But let's do 10 of them like before. And now you see the strange output on the bottom is not there, because after each end of the line, it didn't try to go to the another iteration of the loop. Because remember, we are changing the number that count over here. This is how many times we are looping. So the once the focus of the program is returned over here, when it hits the the loop, and it loops again, and then it comes back over here, then it goes back to our for loop. So that's why we have to break out of it after we hit the end of the line. Oof, so that's it. Well, a little complicated maybe. Again, this is from the Daily Programmer in Reddit. I really suggest you go there. There's many other solutions. Maybe you'll be able to understand others a little better if this one was too complicated or not clear enough. This is, my own solution. It's not a copy of anyone else's, but you can always revisit, other solutions. First of all, you should try to do it yourself. But even if you can't, then go and look at multiple solutions to see how other people approach the same problem, and you can get a better idea of what would be the best approach that would suit you. Alright, so this is all. I hope it helped you, and I will see you next time.